everybody, welcome to the channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, M and J, and today we're talking about the 11th issue of Captain Marvel 2019. This is the final issue for the Star arc before we get into the Dark Carol arc, and this issue seems to lead into that. Apparently Star is going to get her own series next year, so it's disappointing that Star was so poorly handled in this series. There was very little build up to her character. She appeared out of nowhere, and most of the screen time was capitalized by Carol's personal issues. There wasn't a lot of time devoted to Captain Marvel and Star's rivalry, even though that's what the climax comes down to. So this whole plot ended up being not as fleshed out as it needed to be. I'm also confused by the timing of these events. Ripley's motivation is that she hates Carol because of what happened to her on Roosevelt Island, but Minerva's experimentations had to happen before issue 1, since that's the issue where she set that Kraken after Carol so she could infect her, and steal her powers to put them in Ripley. But this issue and the previous one seems to imply that Ripley became motivated to become strong and get superpowers because of her experience with Nuclear Man. So wouldn't she have volunteered for Minerva's experiments after she was returned from Roosevelt Island? But if she was Minerva's only surviving test subject, and she wanted superpowers, that means that this had to have taken place before issue 1. Am I missing something here? Because this doesn't seem to add up. Anyway, I actually like this cover, although it doesn't really reflect this comic at all. It shows Carol ripping off a Kree uniform, and there's her regular Captain Marvel costume underneath. The image gives off a feeling of triumph, and it's nice to see Carol actually happy for once. This comic picks up in the middle of the fight between Carol and Star in Times Square. Star was siphoning Carol's power through that device in her chest, so Carol decided to tear the thing out of her chest herself, which might have been a noble thing to do if she hadn't known about it and had the option to have it removed safely by Tony. Now Carol has this gaping hole in her chest, but she thinks Star can't siphon her powers anymore, which she can't, but apparently she poisoned the water off panel, so now she's just siphoning energy from the people in Times Square. But Carol doesn't want anyone else to get hurt, so she puts the device back into her chest. So now we're back to square one, except she also has this horrible chest wound. So now she decides to try to talk Star down. She's kinda out of options anyway. She tells her she doesn't understand why she's doing this. She helped her on Roosevelt Island and got her out. Star says she's been living in terror ever since being kidnapped by Nuclear Man, and Carol tells her that she understands that, but this isn't the way to deal with trauma. But it turns out Star has the same philosophy as the bad guy from The Incredibles 2. It's this idea that superheroes create victims because people become too reliant on heroes to come save them. So she says she wants power so she doesn't have to be a victim anymore, and she wants to inspire others to not rely so heavily on superheroes either, while she's also siphoning energy from them. Carol points out that she's victimizing these people now, the way she was victimized, but Star says that Carol isn't the answer and she doesn't belong in this world anymore. I can understand that she was traumatized by being kidnapped by a supervillain. One minute she's living her life, and then the next she's teleported to some apocalyptic wasteland. So I can see that she would want power because she feels like she wants to protect herself. But I've never really been convinced by this argument of not needing superheroes at all. What's an average person supposed to do against an alien invasion or a monster attack? I also feel like this same thing could be applied to the police or firefighters, or anyone we would call for help in an emergency situation. By that logic, shouldn't we try to tackle these problems ourselves? I wouldn't say so. If there's a fire, I don't think I can realistically handle it myself. At least depending on the size. There's nothing wrong with needing help. That and being traumatized is not an excuse to hurt other people. Now that Star has access to Carol's powers again, she starts gleefully attacking her, while the crowd looks on in terror. Just when all seems lost, somebody shouts at Star, forcing her attention away from Carol. It turns out to be Hazmat. She saw what was going on and came to help Carol. Carol tells her to get out of here, but Jen refuses and also explains that she couldn't find anybody else. Apparently there's something big going on that requires all the Avengers, although apparently she wasn't able to find out what that event actually is. Seems a little contrived, but the point is no one else is coming. But Star ends up taking Hazmat out with a punch to the face. Well, that was quick. She turns her attention back to Carol only for a child to step between them. I don't like where this is going. She tells Star to leave Carol alone, and then Star backhands her across the lot. Maybe if Carol hadn't chosen to fight in the middle of Times Square, or at least moved the fight to an unpopulated area, this wouldn't have happened. And then there's Star Star going on about how people shouldn't be victimized, only for her to directly attack a child. Star mocks Carol for having a child come to her rescue, but this is clearly a bad thing for Star. It means she's lost control of the crowd. At the beginning of this encounter, she was trying to manipulate them against Carol, but then she went all supervillain, and it's become obvious to everyone around them that she's in the wrong. She could have tried to spin the situation against Carol, but instead she's completely lost control of the narrative. So I guess even though Carol was extremely reckless and put people in danger despite her own morals, she did accomplish her goal of exposing Star's true nature to the public, but that doesn't change the fact that the ends don't justify the means. Star gives Carol an ultimatum of either having herself drained or the people around them, but Carol pulls a fast one and tears the device out of Star's chest, which she probably should have done last issue. She could have done that when she took Star into the air, instead of tearing it out of her own chest. That's way more logical, but the battle is finally over. Carol destroys the device that was in Star's chest so it can't be used again. She and the girl get to talking, which is a good thing. She needs to reach out to people more. They're both okay despite Carol's unnecessary chest wound, but she adds that the girl shouldn't try something like that again. But the girl says she can't, and explains that she wants to be a hero too, and heroes do the scary stuff. This feels like an origin story. They then get to talking about Carol's heritage, and she explains that her mother was an alien but her father was human, and that people can be more than one thing. So the girl says she should explain that to people. It's not always that easy, but it would be good for Carol to reach out more, and have a better relationship with the people she's protecting. The next few pages are more talking, even though Carol still has that gaping hole in her chest and she needs to get that taken care of. It's weird that they're not treating this as a priority, even though people keep bringing it up. Carol hugs Hazmat and they have a heart-to-heart. The other Avengers show up. We never find out what they were doing. Spider-Woman asks Carol if she's okay, and Carol says she is, but she's not sure about Star. And Jessica doesn't care about Star. But it doesn't really matter if she cares, she's a hero. That's what heroes do, they take care of people, even bad guys. But Carol tells her it's Ripley. Both Jessica and Jen are surprised by this, and Jen says she never liked her, but they didn't interact much, if at all. If Ripley was going to be this important to the story, we should have seen more of her. Tony wants to bring Carol and Star back to the lab for medical attention, but Carol demands that Star go to the raft instead. She says that as long as she's alive, she's dangerous, even if she doesn't have powers. She'll probably end up with superpowers again, one way or another. Carol finally gets the medical treatment she needs, but it turns out Minerva escaped off panel. Carol's not happy about it, but Tony explains that this isn't the raft. I still think he could have had better security on her. He's Iron Man. But she also left behind the antidote for the virus, which is the least she can do. Rhodey comes in to pick Carol up for a date. Tony protests because there's still a lot to take care of and Carol is just abandoning him with it, but she ignores him. It's really strange. Tony has been nothing but supportive this entire series, yet Carol and the others have walked all over him. But it cuts to Carol and Rhodey after they've had a nice night and now they're watching TV. According to the news, public opinion has completely turned in her favor, and the military is considering letting aliens and their descendants enlist. That way Carol can get her position back as colonel. I guess that stunt she pulled in Times Square worked, even though it was horribly reckless and irresponsible, but it's pretty awkward that they aren't acknowledging Captain Marvel's history at all. Like, they interview a man on the street about his opinions on Captain Marvel, and he talks about everything she's done for this country. So we're ignoring Civil War II, but Avengers 200 still happened? That's a little weird. Anyway, Rhodey reassures her that everything will be okay now, but Carol's still concerned because they were so easily swayed against her, but Rhodey doesn't really address that point. I'm really disappointed with the way they handled Rhodey's character in this series. He's really just here to be the love interest, and that's it. He's treated more like a civilian than a superhero. We never got to see him in his armor or join in the action. He's just here to be eye candy, to take his shirt off and to reassure Carol and make out with her and make her feel better. They could have been a literal power couple, fighting bad guys side by side, but instead he's barely a character. So that was a real missed opportunity. It cuts to Ripley on the raft, and this was probably the most frustrating part for us out of the entire comic, which is saying a lot, but apparently Ripley now has the Reality Stone, and even is the Reality Stone, without any kind of build-up or setup or anything. It's just completely out of nowhere. At the end of the Infinity Wars comic, Adam Warlock gave the Infinity Stones the ability to choose their own wielder, and for some reason reason the Reality Stone chose Ripley of all people. Why? We barely even know Ripley. She was mostly inconsequential to the story until the last few issues, and this just wasn't properly developed. We figured she was going to get powers again since she was gonna have her own series and it's kinda predictable, but an Infinity Stone of all things? But this is probably how Carol is going to turn evil because Ripley used her newfound abilities to rewrite her, but it's all just so baffling. But that's where the comic ends. That's one cliffhanger. We started reading this series because we thought that Captain Marvel was gonna be important to Endgame, and it turns out she wasn't. So that's a big burn. But on top of that, it feels like this series only exists to set up Star's series next year. And I don't even know why Star deserves a series. There could be potential here, but they didn't take advantage of any of it. So instead we're just left feeling annoyed. Carol isn't even that much of a character in her own series. She makes terrible decisions, but I guess everything works out for her in the end, so it's fine. And then Star is even less of a character. She's the reason Carol went to Roosevelt Island, but then they kind of forgot about her. And all of a sudden she's a really important character with no build-up. Then there's all the side characters. All the girls are her cheer squad. And then Rhodey's there to be her love interest and not do anything outside of that. And Tony's there to be her punching bag, with him getting stuck with all the work and them going behind his back so often, even though he's been really supportive. It's all just so unsatisfying. But that's our review. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts on Star and the future evil Captain Marvel? I'm not expecting that much. We haven't gotten that much so far, so why would things change now? I'm not sure evil Captain Marvel is that far off from what Carol usually is. She was really reckless to put all those people in danger in Times Square when she had other options. But thanks for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content like this. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye, everyone. Bye, guys.